So we're absolutely delighted that we've got more funding coming to the Greater Manchester area for our communities. This is coming via Comic Relief. Many of you will remember that over the last year, Greater Manchester Black Asian Minority Ethnic Network was very successful in bringing Comic Relief emergency funding to Greater Manchester. And I'm absolutely delighted that one of our members, which is Caribbean African Health Network, have been successful in bringing in further funding from Comic Relief, the Global Majority Fund. And they are supported by Macc in helping deliver that fund right across the Greater Manchester communities and bring that support in as we move forward. It's even more needed currently, as it, certainly the emergency was absolutely significant for us to provide that support. But as we move forward, hopefully into a recovery situation, we know that we have lots of impacts of the pandemic and of the further inequalities that have been created. And we know that our communities have been disproportionately impacted and will need every support that they possibly can. So this hopefully will be one of many other Meet the Funder sessions that we can bring to you about other support that's going to be available for this sector. I'll leave the introduction to Charles. I'll bring him in a minute, so I don't want to take his thunder away from this program. But just to say that the current fund that is secured is here for us, and there's been additional contributions from stakeholders across Greater Manchester, which has been wonderful. So Salford CVS, One Manchester, and Trafford Housing Trust have also supported this programme and hopefully added to what's now available for community organisations. What I'm going to do is introduce our speakers on this, and after that, I'll take some questions and discussion. And if we have time after that, we can have a general conversation about how organisations are feeling going through this and what further support they feel that they will need. So I'm going to welcome Charles Kwaku Odai from Caribbean African Health Network. He is the Chief Officer for the network, and I'm delighted that he has worked so hard to ensure that we bring further funds into Greater Manchester. Charles, over to you.
Thanks, Satya, for the invitation. And just to say before I make a start, massive thanks to Atia, who over the many years has been leading the Greater Manchester BAME network. And by virtue of her involvement and support, that was what gave CAHN the confidence. She did invite me to be part of the panel that Comic Relief interviewed for the funding they got and they run. And so all that built confidence in CAHN, putting ourselves forward to this. So just to have that on record, Atia, massive thanks. Right, so I'm going to share my screen and I would do about 8 slides and then I'll hand over to Owen. No, sorry, Oliver, because they both start with an O. So I'll hand over to Oliver. So as Atia rightly mentioned, these are the partners that have funded, the grants program. So it was Comic Relief that gave the money, but that, had contributions from the National Emergencies Trust, Esme Fairbairn, the Cloth Workers Foundation, and then locally, we've been speaking to a couple of partners. There are a few more yet to make up their mind, but we need to make a start because it's been ongoing for a while. So quickly, the Caribbean African Health Network, our vision is ending health inequalities for Caribbean African people within a generation. And we've been working on this agenda before COVID. And as most of you will be hearing in almost all meetings you go to, health inequalities. We were shouting out about that. We were set up back in 2017. And since then, we've been knocking on doors. it's been challenging, but we pursued, we persevered, and, we hear and some great stuff happening. So we aim to lead strategic engagement on behalf of the Black community so that, organizations like yourselves and others, and, they are empowered so that we bring a holistic view when it comes to health and well-being for our community. So, our strap line leading, educating, so whether educating our own community or commissioners by virtue of what we do, leading, yes, Atia will tell you, we try and push and punch at national level as well, and supporting what groups are doing. So it's incredible we're able to run this grants program, lots of advocacy going on, and then also seeking to enhance what others do. And it's worth mentioning one of the commitments we've made to our community, and sometimes it's difficult, but we try and stick to that value, is to ensure that we're not competing with any other Black-led organizations or ethnic minority-led, but looking at collaboration. So the Manchester BAME network with Atia is, an associate of, together with CAHN, Yaran, and others, we have a mental health collaborative, to respond to the needs. And as Atia introduced us, I've been part of the network before CAHN was set up, and we're still here because we have some similarity, although differences, and lots of learning, to do from the wider network. So what CAHN is seeking to tackle, and we did start in Greater Manchester. At the moment, there has been interest from other parts of, the UK. So we branching into other places, and still holding on to those same values. So we're trying to address some of the barriers we identified. So whether it's around decision making, representation, benchmarking to majority population. So decisions being made because majority people can benefit from the budget, and challenging some of those. The racial discrimination, whether it's conscious or unconscious, so some of these things before George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter resurgence. And then poor community engagement, when it comes to, because of tight budgets, people cutting their budget. And, community engagement is the first to go. But as an organization, we made a decision at the beginning of the year, making sure we have locality engagement leads across Greater Manchester. So what led to this funding? We did produce a report in at the peak of the pandemic in the first wave, and it was talking about Black people's experiences. So thanks to the Black community, we had 334 respondents. On the back of that, we highlighted some issues which were also mirrored at national level. The biggest thing being talked about now is the vaccines. We've produced a report, but also once again, CAHN hosts the Caribbean African Community Sounding Board. Atia leads on, the South Asian one, and we've been working over the last few months to increase uptake and address people's concerns. And yeah, there was a big event we ended up organizing in the middle of January, 1,000 people on Zoom, 800 across Facebook and YouTube. And on the back of that, we identified some of the concerns in the community. We did a report, and both these reports have helped in some of the negotiations and conversations CAHN has had. So now coming to the funding, and the program itself, we looking at practice. We didn't want to be prescriptive. So we know within our community, and some of the organizations people run, sometimes funders want new activities. Other times they are asking, that you do something innovative, but we just thought, people struggle around core cost and stuff. So we went for very broad, priorities. And, thanks to Atia, once again, I was on the panel for the Greater Manchester BME Network, community panel, and we could see the need, whether it's around ethnic food, which Atia, I'm sure we mentioned the Rafiki project, which has evolved on the back of some of that work, but Abba is on the call, she was on there as well. So we've seen some of those needs. So we decided to go for something, quite generic. So it could be practical welfare, help. We knew non-English speakers or people who don't have English as a first language sometimes are excluded. So when, Oliver talks about some of the stuff, I mean, the process, he will touch on some of those things. but also reducing loneliness and isolation and enabling people to come together. So whether you want to organize a festival or whatever, it's entirely up to people they want to apply for the funding for. As Atia mentioned, and because we also part of the wider, BAME network. Apologies for those who don't like that terminology. We thought it's important that we are on our path and not crossing over. So we couldn't put in an application, unfortunately, for the wider ethnic minority community. So, the funding will be for organizations that have 51% or more of their board being of Caribbean or African ethnicity. Then it has to be in one of the localities, and the service users' benefits has to be, African Caribbean people. And, we're delighted to be able to take applications in English and French, and also written and video. So I know that could be quite challenging, but, we've got Sandy, we have Zaid, and I'm sure there will be other organizations that could support us. But one of the key things we've done over the pandemic has been, facilitating a Francophone African community sounding board, which has given us lots of insight into some of the challenges out there. So yes, the funding out of the money we had from Comic Relief, 290, 400 has to go out to groups. Apologies for the typo. Then other partners gave, 60K. So what we're hoping to do, because there aren't many, large organizations, but, Oliver will go through the process. We're hoping to do 6 awards of 15,000, and then another 12 of 10,000, and then the rest will be in 5,000 grants. So that might be a total of 34 awards. We did co-production, exercise where we wanted to understand a bit more, about about what people wanted, and so what that is meant is, we've gone ahead with some of these, but if it happens, further down the line that, other pots of money come up, then, that will go up. But, we got to make a start with what's available. And finally, just to say, the plan we have, there will be a couple of engagement sessions. So we will do one in French this evening for the Francophone African group. People can email to request support. I'm sure Oliver will touch on that. Because CAHN, yes, we have lots of friends, lots of relationship. We know some of great work happening. It's important to bring some level of independence to the decision making, and once again, learning from the process at TIA, instituted with the support of GMCVO. So we will, and there are a couple of community members in mind who have had experience of reviewing things at local and national level. So we will constitute a panel, and some of the funding partners want to be involved in some of those. So for example, if we're dealing with applications from Trafford, then there will be an additional rep from Trafford Housing. If it's Salford, there will be someone from Salford CVS. In Manchester, one Manchester. And like I said, there are 1 or 2 national partners that might chip money in. They may or may not have, representatives to be on the panel, but more about, supporting. We also hoping that those who receive the funding, we can have bi-monthly meetings, just so that if there are any, issues that need supporting or, addressing, then we can do that rather than waiting to the end of the grant funding, because we're hoping this is the beginning of much more to come. And then there will be some support around evaluation, and it might mean, some video recordings, and we have a series of conversation. But I think for CAHN, we want to test out new things. We want to be creative and want to see what added learning we can bring to mainstream grant funders. So I'm going to hand over to Oliver. He's going to be he keeps saying next slide, and then I will move that for him.
Right then. Hello, this is Oliver Cranfield. I work for Macc. I'm the grants development worker at Macc, and we are working with CAHN to administer this grants program. I'm just going to try and run through some key aspects of the application process. I'm probably best if I can try and get through the information and then ask questions if you've got them once I've got through the main bit. I hope that's okay. But please do make notes as we go along if you've got questions as I speak. Okay. So as Charles had said, we've obviously got grants that we've broken up into 3 grant sizes. So that's £5,000, £10,000, £15,000. These are whole grants. So when you submit an application, you need to be applying for the whole amount that you're after. So if you're after 5,000, your budget needs to reach £5,000. You won't get any sort of benefit. Say you wanted a £5,000 grant, and you thought, well, if I submit a bid for 4,500, that might increase my chances. It probably won't. It's sort of simplest way to hand over a discrete fund. And so what the application process, which I'll be coming to in a second, is about you explaining precisely what you do with that money. Now, at present, we're talking about each organisation to submit 1 application. To be eligible to apply for the funding, your organisation needs to have a turnover, an annual turnover of less than £500,000 or £500,000. All that's about, we're aiming these grants at smaller to medium-sized voluntary and community organisations in Greater Manchester. And one of the other eligibility criteria, as Charles touched on earlier, is the need for a majority proportion of the management team and ease of your organisation to be from Caribbean or Afghan backgrounds. Change the slide, please. Okay, so what we've got here is just some bullet points that record where you get the information from. So what we've got there is a couple of internet links. Sorry, if we could go forward again. Oh, no, right. Oh, oh. So we've got all of the information you need at the CAHN website, at that website address on the screen there. Or you could go to Manchester Community Central, which is our website at Macc. Basically, both web pages are meant to contain the same information. So all of the background, the explanation of how we're running it, the application forms, all of the guidance are on those web pages. Again, as Charles touched upon, we're welcoming applications both in English and in French. And we're also welcoming applications that are written on a form, which is the usual way, perhaps. We're also entertaining videoed applications. So there's guidance on the website, the addresses on the screen there, which sort of give instructions. If you're doing a written application, there's a form for 5,000, a form for 10,000, and a form for 15,000. And then there is a separate form if you're wanting to do a videoed application. There is still some information you need to write down for us. Hopefully we've laid it out all pretty clearly on the website page, but if you've got any questions about this, we can come back to that. The next slide, please. So in terms of the process itself and submitting an application, so the deadline is very strictly midnight on the 4th of July. That's just over a month away. We wanted to allow sufficient time for groups to think about what they would like to do with funding if they were successful. But we're also keen to get moving, try and get things started now that we have the money in place, to get activities delivered, to get support out to groups that are needing it. So in terms of the process for filling out the application form, there is guidance throughout the forms that are on the website. Do read them. In the application forms themselves, and this also applies to the video applications, do ensure that you answer all of the questions that are on the form. No matter what grant you get, you're asked size of grant, you're asked very similar questions. And the difference between getting a £5,000 grant and a £15,000 grant is the sort of, the more money you go for, the slightly longer answers you have to give. And there's a couple of more questions. We're trying to keep it proportionate. So, you know, if you're bidding for the full amount of a grant, 15,000, you have to expect that will require the most information to assess your application. If you're bidding for a smaller amount, 5,000, it's less information we need, but the information that is asked for, you must provide. So once the deadline has passed, we've received all the bids, then the selection panel will work to sort of assess everything that's being received, whether in French or in English, whether written or videoed, and we then, I will support the panel prioritising which organisations are going to be funded. Now, Macc as an organisation is purely a support and admin organisation. So although I'll be closely involved in the work of the selection panel, I will not have a vote myself. Quite important from a sort of, you know, making sure that there's the right kind of propriety, if you like, in terms of how we run this process. Now, we're aiming to make sure that we can tell all applicants whether they've been successful or not by the 19th of July. So bids in by the 4th of July, and then hopefully within a couple of weeks, then we should have a decision one way or another. The panel gives you the final. If you're unsuccessful, we will endeavour to provide a certain level of guidance as to what could improve bid time. Once we've identified the successful ones, those who've been approved to get funding, they then need to do some what are called due diligence checks. All these are to, if you've been successful, we then need to just double check that you are definitely active as an organisation, you're financially solvent. So we do due diligence checks to make sure that the money that we hand over, you know, we've got the confidence that you know what you're doing, you're able to work with it, you're able to deal with difficulties that come up with projects. So the due diligence process is very brief. We just ask for information like a copy of your constitution, a copy of accounts or a bank statement. All of this information is in the prospectus, and we'll explain all of the detail as we go through this process. So if you've been told you've been successful, you'll get an email explaining everything that you do now. So once we've done the due diligence checks, just as long as we're satisfied that everything's in place and your organisation, you know, you're who you say you are and everything like that. And so we then pay the grant straight away. And you then have essentially a year in which to deliver your activity. If you're delivering smaller scale activity nearer to 5,000, it's not, you know, it's to be expected that the duration of your project might be shorter than a year. Similarly, at the other end of the scale, you've got a £15,000 grant, it's more likely you're going to have a longer project. The longest it is a year. We need all projects to complete by the end of June in next year, 2022. And then the final bit of sort of the process, if you like, that sort of once projects have been delivered, so you've spent all your funding and you've delivered the activities ahead, we will then need you to submit a monitoring report. So obviously that's how we sort of assess how the programme's gone, so that we can report back to Comic Relief and the other funders how it's gone, what we've achieved, what their money has achieved. So obviously that's the standard kind of funding reporting, if you like. Just move to the next slide, please. So this is just a recap, I think. Yeah, so the deadline date's midnight on the 4th of July. It needs to be smaller to medium-sized organisations that are applying for the funding. There's obviously the requirement that at least half of the senior management team and trustees must be Caribbean or African communities. Applications can be in French or English, they can be written or they can be video. And then if we move to the next slide, I think the last one. Yep. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, forward again. Yeah, there. So I think this is the last one, is it? Let me just check my. Apologies. Yeah. So this is the ultimate slide. So inquiries. This is the important. So we hope that all of the information on the website is hopefully pretty clear. However, there's almost certainly going to be questions of one kind or another, from very basic ones to really complicated ones. All questions are fine. We're really keen to sort of be as clear as we can about what funding is for, how it's acquired, and what you need to do to make sure that you meet the terms and conditions for funding. Now, if you're an English speaker and you've got queries that can't be answered by what's on the website, then you need to contact me. And my email address is on the screen there, oliver@mac.org.uk. If you are primarily a French speaker, then you need to speak to Sandy at CAHN. Sandy's email address is there, sandy@cahn.org.uk. Now, certainly from my role, because I'm the administrator of the fund, I can give out general advice. If, however, you're an organisation who would like to access free bid writing support, this support is potentially available in your area. What we need to do is to know at the earliest opportunity whether your organisation would like to get bid support, so that we've got time to arrange that support. Now, as I say, I will offer general advice, but detailed queries about, say, you're trying to fashion a project and to fill out the application form and to break it up in the way that the application form requires. If you want that kind of system, sort of talk it through and make suggestions, it can be provided. But we do need to know at the earliest opportunity, so we've got a few days and we'll get it organised. When we get someone to contact you, they will work with you on your application. It's going to be the support we can give. The CAHN can give support, Macc can give support, but there will be support potentially in other, in all of the Greater Manchester boroughs. So if you're a Salford organisation and you're looking for support, we're going to be getting Salford CVS to support you in writing your bid. If you're in the City of Manchester, it would be Macc. If you're, say, based in Rochdale, it would be Action Together, the organisation. So we'll be directing you to these organisations to get assistance if you require it. So I think I'm going to leave it there if that's okay. I realise I've sort of jumped about and covered things quite briefly, but I'm more than welcome to ask any questions anyone has. And yes, that's me done, I think. Charles?
Thank you.
Atia?
Thank you, Oliver. And thank you, Charles, for all of that detail and outline. Really helpful. Thank you very much. I'm going to take some questions and bring some questions in. Just a couple of comments. I think people will have asked if we can share the slides, and I'm sure we can do that, and it will be very welcome because the slides are really important in that they've got the email contact details and kind of main elements of the criteria on there. So we will send them that out, and Owen will do that. The other point I wanted to make was it'd be really useful, that point you made, Oliver, at the end in terms of potential support available in local areas to help people get the bids in or application help. I'd find it, you might want to find it really helpful either through yourselves or CAHN to get that information on maybe the CAHN's website about who those potential support organisations are and where people can access that support, because that'll be really useful. And I think the two comments I want to make is really good that you've got the criteria as in turnover less than 500K which I think is very useful, and that kind of almost hopefully it means that most of us can apply, because in our sector I don't know many organizations with a turnover like that. So that's helpful for us. And the only other comment, I think, just from your slides that you might want to consider, in terms of the experience we had, and Charles will know this, is your deadline of the 4th of July and decisions by the 19th might be tight. I don't know, because as Charles knows, we were inundated with application forms, and it took quite some time to get through them all. So you might want to think about that, because it does take quite a long time to go through everything. I'll bring in a few questions that have already come in through the chat box. So I don't know whether Paula is here. Paula, you were asking a question about whether you can apply for a startup. Are you there? Otherwise, I can ask the question on your behalf.
Hi.
Hi, Paula.
Yeah, I'm just in the process of setting up a new organisation with a few colleagues, and we require like admin support, and I'm wondering, would we be able to apply for something like that?
Yeah, if I could come in, so maybe that's the other thing, we might have to update the slides and make it very clear. You can apply for core cost, you can apply for specific project funding, and it's entirely up to you, you know. And Atia, we've taken the points on board. So Oliver, we might need to review the timeline for the decision making so that we're managing expectations as well. The other two things that you would see on the application form, which we haven't mentioned, one is around social values. So we've asked specific questions, and I suppose Atia, you know, she knows that inside out. But as you go to certain funders like Salford CVS, so that might be things like how you use volunteers, how you use, you know, local printers and other things, you know, but it could go far and wide. So that's included in there. And then another conversation happening at GM level is living wage funding. And so we want to be a living wage funder. So please feel free when you putting down the cost for your staffing, you don't need to say you're going to pay someone £9 an hour, so that you know, it has to be living wage, and we will be looking out for that. So just to flag up those things. But yes, if you're a new startup, you know, so long as you can talk about the plan and how you know, intend to deliver, you know, your project, then great.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I'll move on
Thank
because
you.
we've got quite a lot of questions. Thank you, Paula. Abba, you had a question. Are you there? So you were asking about why only French-speaking support was provided.
Yes, I am indeed. And it's only coming from the context of trying to understand, because there's so many different languages. Why French?
Thanks, you know, about, I mean, like I said, we did run some code design workshops, and, you know, we invited comments. But also the reason why we're doing English and French, it doesn't mean for, you know, Portuguese speaking and, you know, Eritrean, Aramic or others, Tigrina, we can't, or we wouldn't be supporting. But as I'm sure you know, because you've done stuff at local and national level, that could be resource intensive. So we've had to look at what we have in CAHN and how we just maximize support, really. So it is not to say we wouldn't. So if, and the great stuff you do in Stockport with the Anglo, you know, Angolan community, if you said, you know, can we do something in Portuguese? You know, we would be happy to look into it. And we will, if it means being paying an interpreter, you know, to provide that support, explaining, you know, things, we will be happy to do that. So we're not trying to exclude, but we're trying to, you know, maximize, you know,
Yeah,
support.
thank you. I just wanted to understand. I didn't think you were excluding at all. So
Thanks, Abba. So that's good, I think, in that, you know, everybody will get support if they need support, which is brilliant. And the next question is, I think, from Abdi, but this is the MBJESJB person. Abdi, are you there? I think it's Abdi, about joint application. You're on mute. Okay, you're still on mute. I'll just ask the question on your behalf. I think, is there an opportunity to make joint applications, and is that allowed?
Great. I think partnership bids will be welcome, so definitely feel free. Oliver?
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I would just say about that, sorry, just let me check what the question is. Not to make the joint application. Basically, we would need a single organisation to be the applicant. But yeah, partnering with other organisations to deliver activity is absolutely fine. But there would still need to be one responsible organisation responsible for the grant.
And potentially that could be organisations across different local authority areas as well, because it's a GM area, I suppose. So they might have an opportunity for support from different places on that, which is a good thing too. So I now have a question from Tikala, I think it is. And yours was quite a detailed one around whether you can apply for workshops or a full day activity. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just a simple question, as I've just put it on the chat there, that is it possible for an organization to apply, say, for a 2-day course, workshop, or a 1-day off event? So I know there's a period from July to next year, but if an organization is just planning to have a 1-day off event or to design a course on a particular subject or area, can they do that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, you're more than welcome to apply for that. It means you might not need 10K, to do a one-off thing. I suppose, the money is in and it has to go out, but there has to be a process around it. But it's entirely up to organizations what you want to do. It's just a case of, stating that clearly and being able to, track the outcomes and the difference, that money is going to make. So feel free.
So I'm just going to add.
That?
Go on, Oliver.
Sorry, I was just going to add to what Charles said. Basically, yes, it's an eligible kind of activity. The only thing perhaps worth bearing in mind is that when the panel comes to select which applications are going to be approved, there's a tendency towards approving the projects that are going to achieve the most. And all I'd say is that sort of just bear in mind that your application will be competing with ones that perhaps have more complex delivery approaches, or it lasts a lot longer than, say, a 2-day workshop or a one-off event. So just be aware that you're in competition with others. There's nothing wrong with your idea in principle. It's just a matter of, is it going to achieve the kind of, increasing well-being amongst communities we're aiming for?
So I was just going to add to that, just from our experience, that you will definitely be in a competitive process. There will be many applications that will be having to be judged one against the other. There may be times where, all the applications are excellent, but the money's just not there to fund them all. And, in those instances, the panel may be looking at these issues of value, whether it is social value or whether it is value for money, and the impact. So, they would be looking at the potential impact that maybe a 1-day activity may have, as opposed to a 10-month support activity. So, just think about those things, I think, when you're looking at these, because whilst many of you will write fabulous applications and you run fabulous projects and groups, you're against lots of other people who will do equally the same, and the panel will have to come to some judgment with a limited pot. And that pot that there isn't huge. So have a think about that. I'm going to bring in Yvonne. Yvonne, you had a question about a really interesting one, whether the funding can go for just a post. Do you want to come in?
Yes, hi. Yes, with the experience we have, things I'm asking that question because of the job that other organizations, including mine organization, has been the work that we've been doing without being paid. So yes, we are working for the community with the community, but again, people who are working doesn't have anything. So Mr. Charles said earlier that yes, the funds can support living wage. So like, for example, if an organization applies for 10,000 or 15 and can we take the half for the living wage and the other half for activities? That's my question.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks, Yvonne. I think from our side, it's just a process to give away the money. We know how, as minority-led organizations, we've been treated, and we don't want to replicate that. So you tell us what you want to do. So long as you're saying, okay, if we have someone, working 3 hours a week, that will make X, Y difference. Great, So it's entirely, you are in the lead. We just administering it. That's all we're doing.
Thank you. Oliver, do you want to add anything?
Not particularly. Just hoping. Does Yvonne, do you feel that sort of answers what you were querying?
Sorry, Oliver, could you repeat what you just said, please?
Oh, sorry. With what Charles just said, Yvonne,
yeah.
Is there anything we haven't said that you want us to comment on?
Up to now, everything is clear, but if within the bid, if we are stuck, we may come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in I've got quite a few questions, so if you could keep your questions succinct. It's good for people to come in rather than me giving the questions, really. So we had a question from Bernie in terms of the funds and whether they're restricted. Bernie, are you there?
Yes, I am. My question was, in the process of our application, if we mention something we want to do, and then down the line we see there's something else that's more beneficial or is changed, can we now change the resources to that new activity we haven't put in the application?
Well, I think that would have to be dealt with case by case, because you've said you're going to do one thing and something comes up. For example, most of us had to move our services online due to the pandemic. That was understandable because of the circumstance. So, we will say, and that's why we hope in that kind of bi-monthly get together for grant recipients will be useful, so that things like that could be flagged. So for example, in some quarters, they're talking about possible wave, in the winter. It might mean that you start a workshop or whatever you're doing needs to move online, and you suddenly say you need to buy, some tablets for your service users. And, we have to be flexible.
Thank you, Charles. Can I bring in Eunice from WAST about what kind of activities can be funded? This might be an interesting one for everybody, actually.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, my question was that because whilst we support asylum-seeking women and we do different kinds of activities, so sometimes we run out of funding and for a particular activity, and so I just want to know whether your funding is just for a specific activity that needs to be done with the funding, so that we know how we can apply for. Yeah.
And thank you, Eunice. I think that's a very valid question. I'm sure Oliver might come in. So what we will encourage is lots of creativity and also being, clever as possible. So you can decide to say, for WAST, we're going to be running health and well-being activities over the next 6 months. and we're going to need a coordinator, bus fares, you know, refreshment and stuff. And, you know, at the end of the 6 months, it means that 30, you know, asylum seeking women would have been supported. Their mental well-being would have been, you know, so you can provide some links and, you know, yeah, because at the end of the day, we know we all do great stuff and we try and, you know, make sure we can stretch whatever funding we have. But I think what is important is whatever you deciding to do, you can be able to monitor and report on it so that when we have to report back to funders, they can see the difference their money has made.
Thank you, Charles.
All right, thank you.
There's a really interesting question now from Paula. Paula, are you there?
Oh, hi, Atia.
Hiya.
Yeah, my question, it's really a question about comfort, really, and simplicity. The question, if I remember rightly, was, would you be able to tell a story in your writing rather than filling in the application form? Because not everybody is able with language, and the forms that we do have to fill in for funding can be quite complex.
I'm sure Oliver will come in, but, you know, I think what we asking for video application and we're saying that let it answer the question. So, you know, art drawing could be subjective, but if you can capture that, and let's say you decide to, and what we're asking for with the video is not to get a professional. So if you decide you want to recite a poem as an application by you answering the question, I know it will give us some, you know, learning to do and some extra work, but we wouldn't say no. Clearly, you need to be addressing, you know, for equity's sake, you need to address, you know, the questions and exactly what you're going to do, the timeline, just so that we create a level playing field for others. But I'm sure Oliver might want to chip in.
Yeah, I mean, all I wanted to add to that really was we have to be fair to all applicants. And the best way that we could meet halfway those who aren't necessarily experienced at writing forms, or perhaps, you know, maybe English isn't their first language, etc. That's why we've got the video applications. Now, I like the idea of what you've said, Paula. Don't get me wrong, in terms of what you present and send in, but we've got to be fair and judge all of the organisations on an equal basis as possible. And if we're looking at a bunch of applications, and then what we've got from you guys is sort of, you know, more of a narrative thing rather than the form, it's going to be very difficult to compare. And we need to make sure that we've got the exact information from everybody. It's about how you're going to staff it, run this activity. So I think, and as well, you're welcome to perhaps to sort of, I'm just thinking off the hoof here. What I was going to say is that on the whole, we avoid sending in attachments. We just want the application. However, you might be minded or tempted to add stuff in because it's interesting, or might sort of give the panel more information. We start to get into an area there where the panel finds it harder to control which sort of applications and how to respond to them. So all I'm trying to say, Paula, is whilst, you know, we'd be interested to see what anyone sends in, I think we really do need to adhere to what the application form is, or if you're doing the video application, you need to ensure that you're following the questions in the guidance.
Thank you. Can I just ask every question, person asking questions to be succinct, and also Charles and Oliver to be succinct as well, because I've got a few more questions to get through yet. But just on that, I think, Paul, I think it's an interesting question. I think funders have already begun to give alternatives to application forms for people. And as long as the information is there that is required for the fair process, you know, we should consider people putting in an email response, for example, that then can be supported. And we've certainly at GMCV and GMBME network done some of that support work with the comic relief funding. So I know that Lena had to leave, but this might be a quick response and asked me to ask her question. And ask whether are there any further requirements on budget size for organizations that need to be considered when choosing whether they go for a 5, 10 or 15K bid. I don't know, I think there isn't, but Oliver, Charles, very quick answer on that.
I mean, I could just say very quickly, Charles, that we are encouraging newer organizations, less experienced organizations, to bid for smaller amounts of money. That's the main thing we're going to say about it. So if you're, you've got quite a track record, you've been around for a number of years, perhaps, you're more likely perhaps to sort of bid for 15 or that sort of thing.
It would be quite useful to make that clarity where you can possibly, because I do know some very new organizations who have done extremely well over the last years who probably want to apply for the higher amount. So you maybe think about that one. Arinma, in terms of organization status, did you get your answer on that? Do you want to come in?
Yes, I did. It was mainly, what if one had to be a charity, registered charity or not, or registered organization or not. And then I do have a second question. It was a similar question was asked, but it didn't answer it for me, was the fact about workshops. Are we able to use this fund in order to enable smaller groups that we connect with and work with to be able to engage with us?
I would say potentially, yes.
Thank you.
I don't know if Charles has any comments. I don't know if Charles just dropped out for a minute. Yes, basically, what you've just described sounds like actually quite an interesting approach to trying to spread the effort of supporting communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would. That to me sounds like an interesting idea that the panel would consider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question from I think it's Aqua. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, around whether brand new organizations can apply. And I know Charles put an answer in there that they can, but I will just, I don't know whether you're there, Aqua. I just want to reiterate that question really, because there may be a due diligence issue in there, Oliver. So brand new organization just set up. I don't know whether it's even got its bank account yet.
We need to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. You're so new and you don't actually have a bank account, it's not the end of the world, but we would have to take due diligence steps that we talked about in the prospectus. It's a tiny bit more complicated if you're a new organisation. So one of the things we ask for is annual accounts. If you haven't got annual accounts, then we need to come up with something else to check with you. Either way, it doesn't impact. If you're a new organisation, you can apply, and if you're successful, we will tailor the due diligence checks if they're appropriate to your new organisation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think what my request is arrange for, you have the choice to garner that organization to hold the funds for you if it's brilliant work. So, we wouldn't say no to that. And, just to say, we've been approached by one, GM funder at the moment, and an organization that has applied for money a few times, and they're asking us to provide some capacity building support, whether it's about keeping, receipts and stuff like that. So we wouldn't say no because you knew you can't apply, but, up to 5K and no bank account, you can get another organization to hold the funds for you.
And that's an important point. We certainly made that offer with the comic relief funding we have given out recently, and that is because it does take time to get your bank account set up if you're a new organization. And it has been even more difficult over the pandemic period to get those support systems and appointments with various banks, etc., to do that. So we have come across that and come across some good practice in terms of how to do that quickly. If you need any of that support and help, certainly come back through Charles and GMBME network. We can help you what we found out and how we can make life easier for some of you. So then there's a question now from Ronnie. I don't know, Ronnie, are you still here? Whether great.
Yeah, just a quick one, really. I know faith groups are one of your target groups, but can you apply for a grant that's particularly geared towards a faith activity?
I think, Ronnie, churches can apply for money to do social action or, run a food bank or engagement and supporting youth groups. What we can't give the funds for is evangelism, for example, or, proselytizing. So that's the difference. And we will be having an engagement session with, African, Caribbean, church leaders, but it can't be for religious activity, but we will be encouraging churches, to apply.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Just really quickly, I think Arinma might be here still, or she might be doing a school run. Just go on quickly.
Sorry, very quick. I was just about to go because the part of my question that wasn't answered was whether if an organizational group has to be registered or not. Because, there are some community groups that have been going for a very long time, but they're not actually legally registered. So do they need that legal status of a charity or this or that?
All voluntary community and social enterprise organisations. You can be an unincorporated association, or you can be a community interest company. You don't have to be registered with a charity.
Thank you. Right, I am going on my school run now. I'm on grandma duty. Bye.
Brilliant, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
We've got a question from, I know we're up to time now, 3 o'clock, but if people do have time, and Charles and Oliver, if you've got a bit more time, I've got 2 or 3 more questions. Is that okay? Brilliant, thank you. I've got a question from Majoli.
Yeah. From what I've heard from Oliver talk, is the deadline from the completion of the project is June, and the report has to be written within a month after that. And if you have a project which is planned for the next summer, which is August, so that like a few months after the deadline, the submission. However, it needs preparation, which need to require investment, of course. Will that fit as well into this category? Or
I would say no.
Okay.
There's a pretty sort of strict, we've said to Comic Relief, who's the primary funder of this programme, that we will complete all activities by the end of June. So I do understand that you would do work on your project before delivering it.
Yeah.
It would be within the time frame. But unfortunately, we need the entire project to be delivered within the time frame.
Good, thank you.
Great, that's straightforward. Wathiba, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Wonderful.
Okay, I want to know if someone is a trustee and at the same time he is a manager of a limited company. Yeah, can you allow him to apply to different applications?
I think if you see it in terms of who the organisation is, then basically the answer is fine. It's not, technically it's not you who is applying, it's charity and then the community interest.
Yeah.
They're separate organisations, I presume. That you happen to sort of involved with both, it's going to happen quite a lot. So it's not a huge concern. You are not submitting more than one application. You've got 2 organisations potentially submitting an application. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's a question, or maybe 2, from someone under NCC Manchester.
No.
Somebody there? So the question
thank you. Yeah, sorry, it's just because I'm out and about. But the question is being answered by Pastor Charles. And the 2 questions I asked was where to get the application from. So that's the link is being put there. And then the second question is that because we do quite a lot of things that impact the community, and but they are. If we don't get any funding for them, we just use the church funds to fund that. But if we do get funding, then that would be appreciated. So I've just asked if we could apply for it for some of the things we do for the community, and he has said yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and I think there's a question from Sherry around the panel constitution. Sorry, Bill. Hello, Bill. And you can come in, Bill, if you want, but I think Charles has outlined that earlier on, but go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, sorry about the confusion with regards to name. Somebody that I share Zoom with, instead of putting my name, they put sharing. Anyway, my question is, maybe Charles has answered it, but I'm concerned about who is going to be in the panel, who's going to choose who's going to be in the panel, who's going to make sure that there's no conflict of interest, in all the activities. So it's not very easy to answer these questions. Well, there are some areas, that we need to consider. My second question, if you let me mention it, is It might be more difficult for some areas like mine, where the diversity is so great. It's not very, when we do things, we do it for the whole community. It might be very difficult for us to isolate and say, this is for BAME and this is for non-BAME. We don't do things like that. So I'm sure Comic Relief will understand that, and we should be able to apply for everybody instead of specifying BAME. Of course, our thoughts will be for BAME, and it's up to, but we have to keep an open space for everybody to benefit, and it's up to them to choose whether they are going to join in or not. Otherwise, we might be going towards mild segregation.
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm going to ask Charles to answer that because, of course, this is a wide question around sort of equality, I suppose, and this fund is even more centered not for BAME, but for African and Caribbean lead organizations and communities. So, Charles.
Yes, so thanks, Bill. I think we have lots of learning from the Greater Manchester BAME Comic Relief Fund, but also some of us have been involved in Phoenix Fund in terms of assessing, applications. So there are some people with some experience that we will call upon. And as Atia has taught us, and it happens in other places, there will always be a conflict of interest form that the panel members need to complete before the session runs. Oliver did mention Macc, is facilitating this, and they don't have a vote, but we'll try and ensure, fairness. And the reason we're going for the community panel is it works. It brings level of independence. Other than that, we could have said, oh, we have organizations across GM we're working with, and so we'll do that. And yes, you raise a very important point. And like I said before, we did not want to tread on, other toes. We didn't want to encroach on what the wider BAME network is doing. But there is nothing that should say, if an organization, is Caribbean African and they're running a program and someone who is non-Black is coming to, then you turn them away. So, it's all you need to do in your application is to demonstrate that, you have Caribbean and African beneficiaries who will benefit from the funding. And yes, we know we have mixed race, we have, all the stuff. So yeah, we wouldn't say to anyone that, strictly, focus on the Black community, but you need to demonstrate that. But in running your activities, it can be fluid.
I'll just add to that, Charles, just to reiterate the criteria around this is that this is for organizations that are led by African Caribbean community. So that's why the 51% is on there. And I think that the same happened when GM BAME Network and GM CVO's Comic Relief funding went out, is very much looking at criteria about BAME led. Those things are very important because, of course, there are many organizations out there that benefit all the communities, but they're not BAME led or African Caribbean led. So these are the things that you'd need to be thinking about in terms of criteria. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think I have brought in everybody that I picked up on the chat box for questions and things. If I haven't, please tell me. I think Abba's got a hand up. Maybe I have not brought your question in. You've got an additional thing to add.
Yeah, I just want to add, and particularly with, I just felt the need to say something with Sherry's point. I think there's the reason why these funding are really important for us as Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities is the fact that we're always at the fringes of what's happening in society, and we're never given the same opportunity. This is just an opportunity to raise our profile as organizations within the locality to be able to say, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And it's not usually closed, it's open to everybody, but it is us that's leading the activities and the process. And I'm sure if you ask anybody around the screen, that would be the precedent they're going to take as well. So I just wanted to share that because it's really important to be proud that we are leading our own destiny, if you like. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Abba. Thank you. I'm going to round this off and say really massive.
See her quickly.
Yeah, quickly.
Sorry, I was raising up my hand, but you didn't pick me at all.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
That's fine. So I just want to say that we are very, very excited that this pot of funding is being provided for African and Caribbean organizations because prior to COVID, it was a very big challenge especially for small, medium organizations that were BAME led to be able to access any kind of funding. So I think this initiative is extremely very well appreciated. And I want to say, first of all, well done to everybody that had an input in accessing this pot of funding. The question I want to ask is this going to be continuous support for BAME organizations, or is it going to be a one-off? Because this pot of funding is going to really go a long way in ensuring that Caribbean and African organizations are more sustainable, because we know they are the ones that face the most challenge in terms of accessing funds. So is this going to be, after we've exhausted this funding, is CAHN going to be able to access more? CAHN and Macc going to be able to access more from Comic Relief and from, as many other organizations as will be happy to come on board?
Thank you. Charles?
Yeah, thanks for that. We can try, and there can't be any promises. What we have now is what we're giving out, but Atia will tell you, and I'm sure there will be future workshops via some of the national work Atia, myself, and a couple of others have been doing. There's going to be a Phoenix Fund too that is focused on BAME, and that's 50 million pots, alongside the other lottery funding, and there will be others, that come on stream as well. So, at the moment for this pot, that's what we have. If tomorrow we get a phone call and there's 500,000, then we will come back and run another process. But it's something we'd love to do, but we'll see how things go.
Thank you.
A quick message to Charles and Oliver. Hello, my name is Rhoda. My question is, can an existing organization request more funding in order to increase what they provide during the week?
Yes, you can. Yeah. That's why we said it could be core funding, it could be, scaling up what you do, and it's just, and we will encourage people to be honest and transparent. So you could say at the moment we're seeing to 15 people. We have a waiting list. We want to increase that to 35. Therefore, we need, an extra 10K. I don't see any issues with that.
Brilliant. I'm sure we could carry on, but I don't think I have the time to take on any more questions. Thank you. And I just want to say thank you very much to Charles and Oliver, to CAHN and Macc for bringing this to the Greater Manchester Black and Asian Minority Ethnic Network, to be able to get this out as widely as possible, as soon as possible. So it's fantastic news. I can also say to you that the comic relief emergency funding that we were all involved with, including Charles at the Greater Manchester BAME Network, over the last year, which has just completed, and we will be releasing our report on that. I can tell you that the significant level of that funding went to the African Caribbean communities right across Greater Manchester. That may be a very telling picture in terms of where the massive needs are, where the deepest inequalities are across our communities, and that we need to reflect that and continue to do that. On that point of continuing with the funding, I think Charles will agree, we had the opportunity over this pandemic period for accessing emergency funds. You know, Global Majority Fund is very much as part of that emergency. What we have also done parallel to that is actually influence the national agendas, excuse me, influence the national agendas and do as much as we can to voice Greater Manchester communities. And so within that is where the influencing is happening at a national level, whether it's with the Community Lottery Fund or other big funders. So as Charles has said, we will be seeing another round, hopefully, of a lottery dedicated fund for Black and Asian and minority ethnic communities in the future. But there are other things that are happening as well. So there is another national organization, you may or may not have heard. We will bring that to the next GM BAME network event as well. That is called the Baobab Foundation. That is currently in the setting up. Please go on to the website to look for that. Join it. That is aspiring to be a national BME fund, endowment fund, looking to set up substantial funds so that we have that long-term sustainability and resilience for our sectors, and not just this short-term things when things come and they come to an end. We need something much more longer term, and you're absolutely right to raise that. There are other things happening around us. Please keep a lookout on all of our websites to do that, and join us again on a GMBME network event like this, whether it's Meet the Funder or general networking. It's at those spaces we try and share as much as we can about what we're doing, what our partners and friends around us are doing, but also what is happening at the national level, so that you've got an idea about what's happening in our space and in the environment that we work in. So thank you very, very much. It's wonderful to see so many people, and over 50 people still here, you know, 15 plus minutes over our time. But I do need to finish this. I've got another meeting to get to, as I'm sure many other people will have too. But have a very good rest of the day. Everybody stay safe. I only pray that our communities stay safe as well through the very challenging times we are going through. Thank you very much, and goodbye.